Shane, a very good morning to you.
And very good evening to you, Ollie. Good to be with you.
Good stuff. How's the atmosphere there at Werribee and in and around Melbourne with the Cup just a few days away now?
Well, I've spent the last couple of days out at the Werribee Quarantine Centre where all the international horses are assembled. I've got to tell you, there's a great deal of confidence building through the international contingent, particularly around Luca Cumani's Mount Athos, who really looks to have come on beautifully since arriving in Australia, but also regarding Dermot Weld's Galileo's Choice, the horse that had a minor setback when he first arrived in Australia, lost about 13 kilos in weight, but that's been put on rather quickly, and he's looked an absolute picture as he's gone about his business as he prepares for the big race coming up on Tuesday.
Shane, from a form point of view, the market has, or most of the anti-post markets have Americain on top ahead of Dunedin in the betting, but Dunedin obviously finished in front of Americain in the Caulfield Cup. Is that a surprise to you that Americain is the market leader?
It is to me for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're likely to get fairly quick ground on Tuesday, and I know that most of Americain's form has always been where there's been significant give in the ground. He does seem to, in the 5 times he's raced in Australia, and he has been a fairly busy visitor to Australia in the past couple of years, but the 5 times he's raced in Australia on ground that's considered good, he failed. So I think that's a slight concern. And I'm also probably of the rare opinion here in Australia. There are a lot of people who are absolutely in love with Americain down here. But I'm firmly in the corner where I think Dunedin's a significantly better horse than Americain because I think he's got a better turn of foot. Americain's a horse that really takes a while to build momentum. He can hit a flat spot. We've seen that numerous times here in Australia before he really starts steaming again, where that doesn't happen with Dunedin. He's got that lovely little quick turn of acceleration, and we saw that when he won the Caulfield Cup. He was able to really put himself into the race, and then his class was able to steamroll the opposition. So I think Dunedin should be favoured, even though he's got to do what no horse has done in a long, long time, and that's carry 59 kilos to victory. Mackay Diva, she carried 58 to victory back in 2005. You have to go back to Think Big in 1975, who carried 58.5 kilos. So it shows that the task ahead, but I think the form that he's in and the way that he looks at Werribee, he is the one to beat.
Shane, in terms of the Australian horses, is it hard to make a patriotic case or a strong argument as to why the Australian trained gallopers will be able to beat the European horses?
There's a couple that start to really sort of showcase that they might be a legitimate player going forward. One in particular is actually a former international but has been here in Australia for the past couple of seasons, and that's Moraine, who's owned by our Leviathan owner down here in Lloyd Williams. Moraine's beautifully weighted for the Emirates Melbourne Cup with only 53.5 kilos, and his form this season has been outstanding, and he'll be ridden by arguably the nation's number one jockey in Hugh Bowman, who never gets down to that kind of weight. Hugh traditionally rides at around 55.5 kilos, but he's doing everything he can to get him down to the weight of 53.5. So I think Moraine is definitely a major player going forward to the race. But it's just, as we've seen in recent years, that the international stayers are just simply better. So I don't see why that will change. And in the past 4 weeks, Ollie, the major staying races have all been won by horses that either are still racing out of Europe or began their career in Europe. Glencaddam Gold won the Metropolitan Handicap in Sydney for Gai Waterhouse. I mean, he was formerly with Sir Henry Cecil. Since then, we've had Shawadi, the French galloper, win the Herbert Power. Dunedin win the Caulfield Cup. And then in the last couple of weeks, the Geelong Cup went to Gatewood and Toussaint Staloon, a former French galloper, won the Bendigo Cup. So all the traditional lead-up races have all been won by international horses. I don't see why that's going to change anything come the big one on Tuesday.
Good stuff. Shane, I'm in the studio with Richard Hoyles. He's got a question for you.
Hi, mate. It's nice to have you on our programme for a change. I mean, just for those who are looking in and maybe aren't aware of sort of the build-up, what are the big events we've still got to go between now and Tuesday? We've obviously got the significant trials to whether Gatewood can qualify, but the barrier draw and things like that, where are the big events going to come between now and Tuesday?
Yeah, good to hear from you, Richard. Yes, look, it's madness over the next few days, let's be honest here. It all begins on Saturday our time, so tomorrow my time, where we have Amy Victoria Derby Day. That's the first of the 4 days at Flemington, and it is the most prestigious day of racing in Australia. We have 4 Group 1 races on the card, including the Maya Classic for the fillies and mares. There's the Derby itself, the McKinnon Stakes, which is a 2,000 metre weight for age race, and also the Coolmore Stakes for the 3 sprinters over 1,200 metres. So a tremendous day there, but then it really starts to heat up because that evening we have the official barrier draw, at Flemington, all the connections of those who accept for the Melbourne Cup, and there will be a lot of shuffling as to what the final makeup of the field will be after one of the lead-up races, the Lexus Handicap, because the winner of that race, which is race 2 on the card at Flemington tomorrow, gets automatic inclusion into the Melbourne Cup. So there's a lot of fanfare around that. 24 horses will be determined. The owners get to choose what barrier that they go up and select from one of the miniature Melbourne Cups what their barrier will be. And then it really starts to kick in as of Sunday. There's a lot of major events, breakfasts on the Monday. There's a massive parade of former Melbourne Cup winners through the streets of Melbourne. It's always a great thing to see, but all of the connections all are in the back of vehicles and get driven through the crowds, and it's amazing scenes. Literally, the city of Melbourne stops on Monday for about an hour and a half, and there'd be close to 300, 400,000 people lining the routes to see former Melbourne Cup winners and connections going into the race, and then of course the big race on Tuesday.
Well, it's a race that's got fantastic history, particularly in the race calling front. You go back a long time to the great Bill Collins calling some of those terrific finishes. But if you're forced to put your neck on the line, who do you think will come out on top on Tuesday?
It's a tough one at this stage. Look, I'm down to 4. I think of those who are currently trained out of Australia, Morayan's the best of the local brigade, and I mean he's a former international, so he's not really a local, but he's just had the perfect preparation. But of the internationals, I think the big 3 clearly for mine are Mount Athos, who's just looking superb down at Werribee. I've got to say though, his stable companion, My Quest for Peace, actually worked a little bit better than him the other day, and he ran quite well in the Caulfield Cup, so I know he's coming right into consideration. And the other one is Galileo's Choice, who for Dermot World, he's just in superb form down at Werribee. Dunedin, I think, will run top 5. I'm just reluctant. I'm not sure he can win the race because of the 59, but I think he'll beat Americain Home. But of the major ones for me, I think the 2 Kamani horses, Galileo's Choice, and of the locals, Morayan.
Shane, I'm also in the studio with Angus McNay here, and he's got a question for you about jockeys and Ryan Moore.
Yeah, hello Shane, hope you're okay, mate. Ryan Moore on Mount Athos, he's having his first ever ride in Australia. Is it going to be a real tough ask for him? His first ride being in such a big race. He's been champion jockey over here. He's top class, but what's he got before him in trying to win on Mount Athos? First time he's ever ridden there.
You know what, it's a funny thing. I think for a jockey like Ryan Moore, it actually won't be a concern because Ryan's had such great success when he's gone to ride in Hong Kong, whether it's be hit and run missions or whatever. He's always, no matter where he rides in the world, he seems to come out on top. I think because he's got that rare ability, he'll be fine in Australia. In the past, we've seen a lot of the European jockeys come out, and we do ride very, very tight in our races over here. And quite often you'll see perhaps some of the European jockeys, whereas overseas, racing in UK or Ireland, your jockeys can tend to cover a bit of ground and it doesn't necessarily affect the outcome of a race. In Australia, the way the pace and the tempo of our races is and the way that we ride tight can often bring about their undoing. But I think because Ryan Moore's had experience in so many different regions of the world, it won't really be a concern. Where he'll have to be at the top of his game is the way that the Melbourne Cup, it's not run at a really rock solid tempo all the way through. They tend to go very quick early on in the race for, say, the first 800-900 metres. Then they ease the tempo off for, say, the next 800-900 metres before really starting to sprint home. And he'll need to be, really have his wits about him when he's riding a horse like Mount Athos, who still is somewhat inexperienced for Luca Kamani. He's only had the 3 starts to date. Some of those wins in the UK have been in, fairly straightforward races. A big field of 24 runners, pace chopping and changing quite a bit. He'll have to have his wits about him, but he's done that in Hong Kong, so I don't think it'll be a serious issue.
Shane, just a final question if we can. We were talking a few moments ago about the Australian opinion of the increase in international runners. Do you think that as the international interest increase, the Australian sort of love affair with us sending runners over is decreasing?
No, Ollie, it's definitely increasing. Look, you'll get the old school journos here in Australia who'll like to, do the us versus them type scenario. But I think the harsh reality is the racing world has shrunk so dramatically. I mean, both yourself and Richard, you appear on my radio program somewhat regularly here in Australia talking about major issues that are happening in the UK, which 10 years ago would never have happened because the world has changed. I think that we embrace the fact that the Europeans are coming. There'll always be that narky little element that says, oh, there's too many But I don't think that's the case. The reason the Melbourne Cup has become the race and is now capturing the imagination of the entire world is because we opened our doors and said we want the best of the best. And that's the way it's got to be. If racing's going to have any voice going forward into the future, we need to make sure that we're touching as many focal points in as many regions and getting as much interest as we can. We can't have parochialism anymore.